Hey everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of Fight Chat Friday from TKD Coach Academy. Today is a very, very special episode for us. We are 100 episodes old, so please join us this week in celebrating that small milestone.
Nice little graphic there. Yeah. So thanks to everybody who has been part of this journey, whether you're a new subscriber, one of the OGs, it doesn't matter. Thanks for being part of the journey. We do hope that you've taken some valuable information away from the channel and it has been of benefit to your Taekwondo. So what we're going to do today is compile some of the 10 most valuable things we've learned in 100 episodes. So what are things that come up time and time again, the most common problems and issues people have, and the things that for us give us the best bang for your buck in terms of developing and becoming a better ITF Taekwondo Sparring competitor.
Yeah, they really are simply the things that if you're not sure what to train next or what to put your time into, it's always worth going back to have a look at one of these and making sure that you have a plan in the bag for these situations, because they just come up again and again and again, and you have to have a solution. I think that's the way I consider them anyway.
No, definitely, and they're quite valuable. If you can nail these and have solutions and practice putting yourself in these similar situations, you're going to be able to solve 99% of problems that will be coming your way.
Yeah, and the first one that we have is probably the most common question that we've had whenever we put put out a poll, or we ask people for suggestions, or people want to solve a problem. This is by far and away the most common one. How do I fight a bigger or taller opponent?
Yeah, so this is a very common one. Now, for what we have here as an example, we have Vitaly Solove in blue on the left and Sebastian from Argentina on the right. So obviously there's a massive difference here, but there's a couple of good examples that we can see from this clip that people can take away. So Vitaly doesn't give up on his front leg side kick to the hip. That's the longest route from his legs. And you see here a great example. So you don't want to give up on that when you're a smaller fighter. Also, you want to keep busy on your feet, not giving the other person a little bit of leeway. Here we see where it doesn't go so correct for Vitaly, and he's at the end of the leg. So you don't want to be at the end of that leg when you're the smaller fighter. Yeah,
because the difference in weight or even just leverage matters an awful lot. So if you're trying to move and you get clipped with something, it'll tend to send you a little bit further away than if the heights and the weights were equal. One of those key things is definitely that prioritizing of getting your first score off the hands. It's just usually that's the golden route into your first score.
And that all comes from the footwork and keeping busy on the outside, like we see in the examples here. So that is absolutely vital. So the distance management, you don't want to be on the end of the leg. So you want to be inside in the distance, getting close, or you want to be completely on the outside. The problem with being completely outside is that you got to be careful of the ring position. You don't want to be giving up too much space and leaving them push you towards the edges.
And of course, when it works very, very well for Vitaly here, it's because he's leading. Whereas in this situation, Seba is pushing and is leading, dictating the rhythm. When Vitaly gets things going his way, it's because he's pulled, he's dictated the rhythm, he's set everything up, and that's what you want to be thinking, is being proactive the whole way through.
Yeah, that's a great point. You want to be first. You don't want to be waiting for the other person to get going, because as well, you got to remember, chances are you're not used to reading distance that the bigger people have, because it's not that you're used to. So you don't want to be trying to figure that out in there. You want to go first and let them solve the problems you're giving to them.
For sure. So the second thing, again, it's a super common one, and in particular if you're fighting in our ITF, in the European theatre, you have to deal with front leg and front leg side kick in particular all the time. You have to have solutions for this. Male, female, junior, senior, doesn't matter. You've got to be able to deal with this. So that's going to be the next challenge that we have to unravel: how to beat the front leg.
Yes, we've got lots of examples here and lots of ways to beat it. You can go under the leg like we see here, Axel. But what some good solid principles is, you want to come over the top of the leg like we see here from Kian. So if it's a middle section side kick, you want to go over it. Of course, you can clash with your own front leg and go as well. So that's a nice example here as well from Martin Gadea in red. So you do want to be aware of that. You want to be first ideally. You want to be on top ideally. And these are all examples of being on top. As well, you have options of coming around the leg as well. this works nicely if you change it. So if it's a middle side kick, you go high. If it's a high side kick, you come under. So if you do the opposite, that's a nice little strategy to be able to deal with that front leg. You ideally want to be covering this problem as it lifts, like we see here, Ryan Shelley in blue. As the leg comes off the floor, he's worrying about that problem and getting it done early. You don't want them to get a little bit of momentum on you.
I think that one's worth just reiterating as we're watching through the last couple of these. The earlier you can cut off the problem, the more problems you're cutting off, because the front leg develops and gives you more options the higher the knee goes. So it becomes, it could be a turning kick, a hook kick, a downward kick, it could be a hacks, a side kick. But if you can get in there and interrupt it before the knee gets above the hip, you have a very good chance of making that counter work for you.
And again, David Kerr here in red is an example of keeping his footwork and his rhythm. He doesn't stop and wait, because then it's easy for the person on the side kick to read what you're going to do. He's still moving and given possibilities of many options. So that's another key if you want to counter well.
Yeah, absolutely. And, while we're still on that vein of the most common things that you're going to encounter, and this absolutely has a Northern Hemisphere European flavour to it, but I think it's common the world over, is the blitz. Because we've seen it happen where if someone has a good blitz and the opponent can't answer it, that is just the end of the match right there. So we definitely want to have something in the bag to deal with an effective blitz.
Yeah, well, it doesn't matter what we call it. It's the same thing. Somebody going as an entry shot with their hands, basically. So whether it's just launching in with your hands or going a traditional point fighting style blitz. So we have lots of examples here. Adeline in red using the front leg side kick. So you need a bit more distance. And what will help you with that is using your front hand as a deception for the correct distance as well. And as close you can have your feet, the better. On this one, we have Timothy Boss doing a jump away back fist. A nice little option that we don't see too often. Again, we have the jump away defensive side kick, which allows you to buy a little bit of distance. So that's another option as well. So basically, when we're looking to defend on the blitz, what we're looking at usually is keep your front hand extended, because that's the first barrier to entry. We want a little bit of a further distance if possible. And ideally, you want to have some space behind you as well in case you need to jump back or retreat to make the distance.
Yeah, and in that space, remember, it's not just the space between you and your opponent that matters. If you're in a very short stance, it's hard to make a defensive movement and to move away from that because your feet are so close together. If you do have that longer or more defensive stance when the blitz is launched, you can retreat into that stance, soak up that distance that's stored there between your 2 feet, and make a bigger distance. And it's that in combination with what Richie was saying in terms of having the front hand extended and giving the illusion of being a bit closer, often means that you've got a much better chance of making a defense in the straight line.
Yeah, so another option here from Carver and Roon is slipping off that straight line as well.
Yeah.
So take the head off what is their target, get rid of that off the straight line, and pipe down the straight pipe with the backhand is another option.
Yeah, so
what we did see
taking the head off, not with the backhand, but taking your head off their line.
Yeah. Exactly. Again, this is a nice option here as well of selling the dummy, looking as if you're trying to close in the distance and then with the intention of retreating. So you come in as if you're going to be ready, then the head is closer for them to punch and you shift back. So nice little small details there that make all the difference for being that step ahead. It's always the same. It's like if you want to be a good counter fighter, you need to be a step ahead, not waiting. So you don't want to be second fiddle.
Absolutely. From there, we have the situation that often happens, and we're looking at this in two different ways. So you've managed to do well and you've gotten the lead. Now what do you do? And what do you do if you're the opponent? So maybe your opponent has got the lead, and so in this one we're going to look at what we call hunting rabbits. So your opponent is gone on the run. They have no intention of engaging with you. What do you do?
Yeah, so there's like generally two instances where this will happen. It's their general style to pull you around, make you overcommit and counter, or they're up on the scoreboards hitting towards the end of the match and you have to come chase them in a 7x7, possibly 8x8 ring, which isn't an easy task. So Julio actually features in two of these clips, but he's somebody who likes to move, especially when he's ahead. Mac Hadel here in blue actually shows great examples of how to squeeze and to squash the space to limit the ability that he has. So you can see he keeps the front hand high, which is vital. The front leg light. So when we say light, it means there's no weight on the front leg, so he can quickly lift it. A lot of people try to track with their back foot, so they move their back leg around, but that means all your weight's on your front leg, so that's not a good option. So you want to be able to keep the front leg light, front hand high, and squeeze the space gradually, because eventually Julio is going to have to make a decision, or whoever's on the edge, that they have to do something or else they're going to commit. So this is an example where he has to come forward, so you want to be ready for that. And if you can do that while cutting off the corners, not going in to the left or to the right, but actually tracking almost like a triangle, then it's the better option here for you to squeeze space, cut off the possibilities, and then eventually get your own pressure going like we see here from Matt.
Yeah, and I do think it's really, really important, like with working against that taller opponent we said earlier, you have to be just as active with your footwork as the person who is looking to work the edge of the ring or, work around those corners, because the second that you get lazy and you start to step, bring the 2 feet one after the other around the place, you end up with your feet crossed and they have a great opportunity to burst out of the corner, which we're going to have to talk about a bit later, how to get out of the corners. But that's a very, very big deal. You need to be making them twitch or blink and move themselves back, find themselves with 1 foot outside the ring, because the second a person who's back into the corners has a foot outside the ring, their movement options become a lot more limited and a lot more predictable, and you can go to work.
Yeah, you don't want to be chasing, exactly. You want constant, patient pressure of a build-up and squeeze. It's the idea of like when you squeeze a car and a car is being squashed, it's like it's a gradual pressure. It's not just one big push. So that's the idea. You're trying to squeeze off the space gradually, not over-committing where you can get picked off.
So requiring the same kind of concentration but in a different form. Once you've got that lead, how do you keep it, particularly when you've got a short time left on the clock?
Yeah, so like here we see Ross in blue on the left. What he's doing is he's staying very, very busy, but he's actually not using a lot of shots. So that keeps your control of the tempo and the intensity of the volume, let's say. So you want to control the distance ideally, and you want to control the tempo of the fight. Again, that front hand high is going to be a big factor. Having plenty of space behind you to make lots of decisions is definitely going to be a good help. And again, just playing with that front leg, keeping it light and not getting sucked into a battle where you can be into like a high volume battle in terms of lots of techniques. So try keeping it a very low scoring match, control the distance, control the tempo, and that's what you want to do.
Yeah, I find that there's kind of 2 things that we almost want to caution people against here, and the first one is it's not part of your normal style, going back to the edge of the ring and becoming the rabbit is not necessarily a great option for you. That takes practice as well. So fair enough, if you're good at it and if that's in your normal style and if it's something that you feel that you can pull, it's great, because it often, like you're going to see maybe with Julio here, it gives you the option as you're pulling to be able to catch your opponent overreaching, because they know they have to chase that lead and you might get a nice big score, build momentum, separate things. On the other hand, if you're not so good at it, it often means that you run and you panic and you find yourself running out of space, giving up warnings, or just walking onto a score. The second one is trying to just stand your ground and pick up the fence with the front leg. And often that's it's good if you're fresh, but if you're tired towards the end of the match and you're relying on keeping that front leg up, much as we have here, it's very, very, very easy for that to wear out, lift a little slower, get clashed, and the other person to get in. So doing a little less work, I think, is and threatening more is a good option.
Yeah, so like lots of actions but less volume in terms of shots, let's say. And I think that's the key for it. So we've seen like in the last couple of clips here as well of Urshka and Vitali, for example, using that long jousting side kick, not short ones where they can come through, keeping the distance as long as possible. So to the hip, so that's the longest route from A to B in terms of a side kick, and that's keeping the opponent at bay, keeping them back.
So the next one is a big deal for me. It's about momentum, and we often find that people will get a score and then there's this like stop moment where they want to have a look at the scoreboard and make sure that the score went on there, and it often leads to we're not getting as much out of the fact that the person has gone in, done all the hard work, created a score. Usually if you've created one score, there's another score on the table, or you can improve your ring position, or you can improve the situation in terms of warnings by having your opponent exit or fall. So in terms of building momentum, just a couple of nice examples here, and this is Davide Messineo against Carl Van Roon from a little while ago, but you can see the pushback has happened and he's managed to get that the dolio over the shoulder, which is huge. But what I'm particularly impressed with in this one, what I really like about it, is he's also the first to react to the fact that Carl hasn't travelled and the referee hasn't called him for an exit. So he's here.
Yeah, the re-engagements are massive. If you can pick up on those, they're great shots to pick up, because they're very evident for the referee, especially if the other person isn't ready. Let's say like here, where like there's a helmet gone astray or whatever.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, this is recognizing, I think, as well, and capitalizing very quickly on the fact that the opponent is on the edge of the ring. and it would be so easy to just step back and bounce and wait and see what happened on the scoreboard. But keeping the pressure on here and being the first to go again is huge. And what I think is a big thing to say about this is, like, the opponent in red here, when there's that split in rhythm, he could be moving forwards, he could be attacking, but it's not happening. So I think it was that one Ian O'Hare, I'm not too sure actually. But there's always a choice there, and being the first one to capitalize on it is a big deal.
Yeah, so like when you're looking at building momentum, obviously you don't want to have single shots. So looking at more towards combinations, a little bit more of a higher intensity, and again looking for those re-engagements, which usually will come off with the hands. So after you exit and re-engage, most of the time it'll be a blitz again.
Yeah, absolutely, and it so often happens. It's immediately after a restart. It can be, when someone expects that they'll exit or expects that the referee will break. There's a small break in the rhythm of the match, and you can even create that break in the rhythm yourself by having a small shift back before going again. And people just naturally make assumptions, and they, and if you're very quick, and if you plan to go and to follow through until the referee stops, often you get the advantage of those, and you get bigger shifts in the scoreboard.
Yeah.
Taking us all the way back to the very start of the match, though, probably a good idea to have a positive start. And what would that look like? Well, I think the very first thing is there's a signal of intent when you are the first one to signal your intentions. You either take space, you raise the intensity, you throw the first shot, and whichever one it happens to be, I think it does make a statement that you're quite clear about what your first plan is, and that you are going to implement that plan through, over, above whatever it is your opponent wants to do.
Yeah, definitely. So we did cover recently in our members group the mindset of competitive sparring, and this is something that we did touch on, is your big two mental shifts. So number one is you making a very positive start. So that's something that you want to have in mind, and that just gives you that little bit of confidence behind you that you've making a positive action. So you're taking space, you're getting your front leg off first, whatever it may be. So linking that in with keeping your tempo, your rhythm, and just having that positive start is very good for the mindset, because it switches you on straight away. You're not really like getting into the match as it goes along. You're ready to hit the ground running.
Absolutely. And this is kind of just separating it from, it doesn't have to be perfect. We can see Rostic in red here. He signals his intent. He closes the distance against Tulio. He's made that, ramp up in intensity right away. And, he's thrown the first shot. Now it hasn't worked because the timing, it goes slightly wrong. He misjudges the timing against Psychic. But again, if all of that happens closer to the centre of the ring, Rostic might well have found himself back on the edge of the ring when all of that happened, and closer to receiving a warning. But it's about, I think, that mindset of knowing what your game plan is going to be when you get in there and implementing it from the very start.
Yeah, definitely. If you can get it up on the scoreboard as well, nice and early, it does help you, because it just gives you a bit of confidence. It lets you to settle into your natural game a little bit more. So that's a good little cue for you as well to be able to aim for, to get yourself up on the scoreboard early.
No one really makes a plan around being behind, and it is something you should do, but nobody really wants to practice being behind, because mentally it's it's almost defeatist. Like, you're telling yourself you're going to go behind, where it is a situation you need to practice for. So but most people imagine that it'll be a slower start and then you'll get in the lead somehow, and sometimes it's not, and in 2 seconds you're already behind or you're already ahead. So might as well be the one who's ahead.
Yeah, definitely, especially considering that we have very short rounds as well in ITF, 2 minutes at the highest level, so you need to get your work done. Exactly.
So a situation that emerges quite an awful lot is where a fighter finds himself on 2 fouls. So for anyone who's not as familiar, the threat there is that if you pick up a 3rd foul, you're disqualified. So usually speaking, you then have to change your style to kind of protect or remove the threat of a foul for contact in particular. And I think it puts you in mind of what you need to do when you're team sparring against a smaller opponent. The hands need to be light. They need to be, rather than engaging into contact with the hands need to be for countering, for changing position, single front hands in particular, that kind of thing, backhands to the body perhaps, and a reliance on a bigger distance and the use of the leg. And I think that keeps most people fairly safe.
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. If you have the approach of point sparring And if that's the kind of mindset you're going in there of taking it score by score, low volume, more singular shots, of course you can make some combinations, but you don't want to get into a punching exchange basically, where that's 90% of the time where you're going to pick up that extra foul. Try to stay to your kicks a little bit more. If you can stick to that, then you should be safe.
Yeah, and it's definitely something that, again, you kind of need to practice for, because people often get caught out when their shot selection is taken away from them, when they're having to lean into another pool of shots, and it freaks people out a little bit. So, practicing in training with your follow-ons taken away, hands only in singles and things like that is a very, very easy way to simulate having that kind of two-foul situation.
I think Ahmed does a good job here and shows a nice example as well, that his game mostly would be using the hands, but he's using them quite cleanly and just using two. So he's in front hand, backhand, and he's out, exiting and moving off. So you still can use hands, but you don't want to get into an absolute brawl and just throwing hands and throwing wild hands. That's what you don't want if you're on two fouls.
Exactly. So that brings us through to some of the tail end stuff. So what do you do if you found yourself pressed into the corners? How do you fight your way out, and how do you improve your situation from the corners? Because no matter who you are, you will find yourself there sometimes, and we've titled this one The Great Escape.
Yeah, so this is like the flip side of the hunting rabbits, really, isn't it? And what we said on that one, you're looking through the opposite literally on this side. So reversals are something that we look at. So you're in the corner and you do, for example, here you jump through and switch position. So here's a reversal, an example of that. When it's in the corner, even nicer. Some other things, Adrian, that we can see is making better decisions a little bit earlier, not being on the edge.
Don't wait until the last mat and with one foot outside. That same technique is risking a travel. If it happens a little bit closer to the edge of the ring. So if blue was to do it from there, you're risking traveling. And obviously this is also kind of showing you that, well, you can move towards the corners if you have plenty of ring in front of you when you start, and there's still time to fix things. But I do think as well the area of going to the corners is something that, if it's in your game plan to pull people towards the corners, can be very effective, because moving to the corner like this forces people to commit. They want to push you out. They want to capitalize on your position. And having them commit means it's much easier to take that next option. And here we can see as well from Thomas in the corner there, leading the person. They want to squeeze you. They want to close you out. It lets you have reversals of direction. And I mean, the principles that we would tend to have, if you're moving back into the corner, you can go straight through your opponent, you can go around your opponent, or you can attack them. In terms of, I suppose straight through is attacking them. You can go around them in terms of the attacker, in terms of their movement, or you can lead them and avoid. So it depends how deep you are in the corner. Yeah,
so there's going to come some stage when you're in the corner where you have to make a decision. Either I'm going to go forward and attack them, or I'm going to have to step out and take a warning for an exit. So there has to come a decision at some stage. So the earlier you can make it, the more options you're going to have.
Exactly that. So our very, very last thing comes maybe much less frequently, and it's that situation where the match is a draw, the extra round has gone to a draw as well, and we find ourselves in that first point or golden point scenario. And it changes the game on its head. Everything changes. So, Richie, let's just simplify this for people. What works?
For me, it's front hand, front leg. So anytime I've ever got in a golden point situation, for me, 90% of the time it's been front hand. Trying to get that timing correct for that, ideally. But, of course, most people know that. So then because they know that, they're going to try set traps as well. So that's something to be aware of. Something that I would be looking to adapt in this situation is what worked for me in normal time. Because if something worked against a particular opponent, maybe is my front leg sidekicks working really well, or maybe I'm able to pick them off and counter off the front hand every time they commit. So what worked for you in regular time, try to bring that to the game as best you can. Don't be looking for something that's a Hail Mary shot, and that's something that's like not a high percentage. And just to play with the psychology of it there as well, if you know something has been effective and that's been a go-to shot for somebody, sometimes the option is offer it to them. So, show that shot for them so that they go for it, and it makes your counter that bit more predictable, because you're giving them what they want. Mentally, they'll just reach out and grab for it. And as you said, people will lay traps because they're expecting that front hand situation the whole time. They can often be overcautious of it and ignore the threat of the front leg to the body, because usually that's covered. But that front leg to the body, or the front leg being over the top, might just be what gets you close enough to engage with the front hand. Yeah, definitely. And like here, Luke in red is an example of that, because he's somebody who's a massive threat off that front leg. And then because of that, he sets up the hands. So being aware of that, and then Michael was just slightly caught napping,
Yeah.
wasn't ready for the hands over the top, and that opens up that shot. So exactly, if you can be almost setting traps and luring your opponent in, it's a nice strategy to have.
This gives you the other one then of like, once you've set a pattern and convinced people that it's going to be body, front hand to the head, body, front hand to the head, that kind of thing, it gives you that option that, well, maybe we'll do this a little differently and take the one off and go for it. And it takes a little bit of cojones, but
Yeah.
when
Right,
it works,
James.
it works very visibly.
Yeah, and that's a major part for point fighting and golden point as well. You want a clear, visible score for the referees. It's not something that's scrappy, that could be 50-50. You want something that's very precise, very obvious, that it's a clear, visible hit.
So that brings us through 10 things that we feel are like super important questions to have an answer for in your sparring. They're go-to areas to improve your training. You can always go back and have a look at these and say, which one of these could I do with spending a little bit more time on? Because when they emerge in sparring, you want that answer ready to hand. You want to have something that you've trained and practiced. You don't want to walk into the ring and go, oh my God, he's very tall. What am I going to do now? You want that to be something that you already are familiar with and you've practiced. So that applies to each one of those 10. Really have a good look through them. Think about it for yourself. Hey, what do I do in this situation? How does that work for me? What are my go-to shots? What distance do I want this to be at? What rhythm do I set? And really think through them. And I promise, if you keep going back to the well on those and you keep going back and training those areas, your sparring will continue to improve.
100%. And if there's anything that we didn't cover today that you think, okay, this is something that's a common problem for me and some of my training partners that have experienced this as well, let us know in the comments, and maybe we can do a whole video and a whole episode on a particular subject, because we're at episode 100. We've covered so many topics at this stage. There's plenty more, of course, but at this stage it is becoming a little bit more difficult, so definitely get involved there and we try to answer your questions as best we can.
And then this week for our members, we're going to be looking at a range of exercises on that capacity building phase and trying to look at how we take exercises that are common in other sports that have crossover and transferability to ITF Taekwondo, and we're going to have a look at how we've been implementing that in our own classes over the last number of weeks. So if that's something that's of interest to you, our members group is open. We'd be delighted to have you, so come on in and join the discussion there.
Yeah, look for the join button on our channel. So get onto our homepage on YouTube, look for the join button, and you can get involved there in the members group.
Excellent stuff. Folks, thank you for watching for 100 episodes so far, and we'll see you next Friday.
See you in the next one.